So Deputy Asedillo, for those three subjects of your parallel efforts right now, yung bona fides ni Shi Zhejiang, then pangalawa, sorry, what was the second point? And then the third was any relation to Guo Huaping. What was the second subject of your parallel efforts?
Madam Chair, there was mention in the documentary
Yes.
that allegedly Xie Zhejiang was recruited here in the Philippines.
Right.
We would like to look into that as well.
Okay. So for these three subjects ng parallel efforts ninyo, kahit in broad strokes, ano pa ba yung ma-share nyo sa komite sa findings nyo so far?
Madam Chair, these are ancillary to the proceedings today. If you would allow, they are a bit lengthy po.
How long? How lengthy? How many minutes?
This would probably be a few minutes lang po, but I think this would highlight what has so far been uncovered in this committee and how this ties up with the current efforts of the legislature to plug the gaps and the loopholes in our system.
Please
And-
proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Enzo Recto, kalaban ang katiwalian at kasinungalingan, kakampi sa katotohanan at kabutihan.
Once again, good afternoon to the committee, Madam Chair. Thank you for this opportunity. Without causing undue anti-Chinese hysteria,
If I may, Deputy Cedillo, this is not anti any country. This is really anti abuse of the rights of women, children, workers. In fact, alam naman po ng lahat, marami sa ni-rescue na human trafficking victims ay mga Chino mismo. So this is anti yung pogo and criminal activities na kinakanlong nila. So please proceed, Deputy.
thank you, Madam Chair. Very well understood. I think it is important for the committee and our nation to understand the three possible trajectories of massive Chinese presence in our country. One, we have been host to, at various points of our history, we have been host to massive Chinese diaspora. Is this latest influx part of that long-standing trend, or is this something else? Two, there is also the potential that Chinese criminal elements have relocated into our country, having found a safe haven here. Three, this could be related to the first and second, part of a genuine Chinese Communist Party and Chinese government effort to infiltrate, establish a foothold, and ultimately undermine the Philippines and its national interests, whether our foreign policy or our domestic affairs. The three I mentioned cannot be viewed in isolation anymore, generally because of the authoritarian nature of the Chinese government, and specifically because of a piece of Chinese legislation, the National Intelligence Law of 2017, that compels Chinese citizens and entities, even foreign ones operating in China, to cooperate with security and intelligence agencies. And it is a very broad mandate, specifically Article 7. The United Front, which the chairperson earlier adverted to, must be understood not just as a Chinese Communist Party arm, but also as a broad system involving agencies, social organizations, businesses, universities, research institutes, and individuals carrying out United Front work activities. It is at once a dedicated body within the Chinese party state apparatus and a galaxy of actors orbiting around it. Another aspect to United Front work, Madam Chair, is its broad spectrum, whose depth is often underestimated, ranging from open operations, that is, public diplomacy undertaken by ambassadors across the world, to clandestine operations, which we are now seeing part of, to undermine social cohesion, exacerbate racial tension, influence politics, harm media integrity, facilitate espionage, and increase unsupervised technology transfer. While United Front work is not an intelligence service per se, it can nevertheless offer a cover for intelligence officers carrying out clandestine actions and recruitment of local agents, our very own Filipinos, acting for and in behalf of the CCP and the Chinese government, whether or not they are conscious of it. Since coming to power in 2012, President Xi Jinping has reinvigorated the United Front, which he was already familiar with, his father being a contributor to it during his early days. In May 2015, the United Front work was raised to the rank of Central Conference, thereby acknowledging its increased importance. The most distinctive characteristic of United Front work in the Xi Jinping era consists more than ever on the strategic importance of the United Front and the necessity to improve its coordination. Lastly, Madam Chair, the United Front is therefore a Communist Party policy devised to develop and reinforce its hegemony. The activities of the United Front consist in allying with or neutralizing groups situated outside the sphere of control of the Chinese Communist Party to ensure its role as the sole legitimate representative of the Chinese people. Concretely, this means eliminating domestic and external enemies, controlling groups that could defy CCP authority, building a coalition around the party in order to serve its interests, and projecting influence abroad in such a way that even individuals and groups based in liberal societies such as ours are brought to censor themselves and avoid taking a position against the Chinese Communist Party. So in conclusion, Madam Chair, whether or not we are able to establish the espionage activities of both Xie Zhijiang and Wan Guohuaping, we already see, Madam Chair, the extent of malign activities of a certain nation in our country. And as a, Madam Chair, if you will permit, this has an impact on the current efforts of the Senate, especially in one, encouraging all our government agencies and even our local government units to pursue prudence and due diligence in their dealings with entities from mainland China. Even noting the efforts previously of our Senate Economic Affairs under Senator Win and our Senate Committee on Public Order and Safety, we already saw the corrosive effects of the POGOs earlier. I think this was last year. Therefore, we encourage the efforts of Senator Jinggoy Estrada in amending our Commonwealth-era espionage law and combining it with efforts to draft an anti-foreign interference law. Also, the strengthening of focal agency measures pertaining to, for example, our birth certificate, which has become the entry point for all other fake documents like passports, LTO driver's licenses, and the like. Third, related to the previous measure, to strengthen the counterintelligence efforts, not just across defense, military, and intelligence agencies, but even those government agencies that may have indirect security implications. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Deputy Asedillo. Pati sa pagtukoy ng at pag-affirm ng mga areas for remedial legislation na pinapahalagan talaga ng komite namin as we have gone through these successive hearings. Yung brief but very substantive report nyo prefigures some of my follow-up questions and I think gives a very important, not just cautionary note, pero sabi nyo nga paalala o mungkahi sa lahat nating nagtatrabaho sa gobyerno. So it's an understatement almost to say na plausible yung Al Jazeera documentary. Not 100% certain but at least plausible. Tama po ba, Deputy?
Yes, Madam Chair. If I was referring earlier to certain common elements between Ms. Guo Huaping and Xie Zhijiang, if you can notice between them, Madam Chair, they were practically plucked out of obscurity. And they suddenly become awash with cash, which allowed them to foray into business and eventually, in the case of Ms. Guo Huaping, even a foray into politics. Again, without discounting the possibility that this is in aid of espionage activities, on the basis alone that they are able to penetrate various agencies of government, undermine various systems existing within our country, this becomes a very, very, shall we say, insightful case for every one of us to take note, Madam Chair, not just us in the national security sector.
Opo. So, kaya siguro that accounts for the great interest ng ating mga kababayan sa particular case study na to. And dahil napaka-interesante in that way also si Xie Zhijiang, sinikap na ba ng NICA makipag-ugnayan kay Xie?
Yes, Madam Chair. Again, without divulging further detail, there is indeed such an effort.
Okay. Now, one thing that, and nabanggit nyo na rin kanina, almost indirectly, Deputy, one thing that stood out for me, dun sa Zoom interview namin kay Wang Fugwe, yung sinabi niyang not all the spies are Chinese. Tumitingin din ba kayo sa mga alegasyon na may mga kababayan nating espiyang Pilipino pero nagsisilbi sa interes ng dayuhang bansa?
Madam Chair, there are at least 3 ways that this may be achieved. One is for the Chinese government to make use of their massive diaspora, not just here in the Philippines, but all across the globe. Second is the use of our own citizens, either through the promise of money and other enticements, whether or not sila po ay sold doon po sa gustong gawin ng CCP. On the mere fact po that there are enticements, madali po makuha ang loob nila. A third, Madam Chair, although wala pa po kaming documented instance of this in our country, there is one instance in the United States that the Chinese government used a Taiwanese citizen to access sensitive information within the US government, Madam Chair, because precisely that Taiwanese citizen would be a throw-off. Hindi po siya paghinalaan given the strong alliance of these two countries, of Taiwan with the US, pero siya po yung tinarget at siya po yung nakuha ng Chinese government.
At yung animosity din supposedly between Beijing and Taipei. Gusto ko lang, before I go on to my next question, gusto ko lang i-make of record dahil 2 beses nang nabanggit ito and kahit papaano nababahala ako eh. I know it's necessary dun sa pag-aaral nyo sa 3 possible trajectories, 3 paraan, pero nababanggit talaga yung massive diaspora. And gusto ko lang ulit i-affirm na Chinese Filipinos are Filipinos. At yung Chinese-Filipino community dito sa atin, on many occasions, ang majority sa kanila talagang explicit sumusuporta sa Philippine national interest. And in particular, ilang pagkakataon tumulong mismo sa investigasyong ito ng Committee on Women. I wouldn't be surprised kung sa Committee on Economic Affairs, on Public Safety and Dangerous Drugs, even Committee on Labor na isa pa sa mga Senate committees na nag-imbestiga laban sa Pogo. So kaugnay nung pinag-usapan natin kanina that this is not about anti-China or anti-Chinese dahil tumutulong din po tayo sa mga Chinong victim survivors ng human trafficking. In the same way, gusto ko lang i-make of sarili kong maternal great-grandmother, pure Chinese. Halos lahat siguro tayo around the table, we have the heritage as well. So I just wanted to make that of record while appreciating yung difficult task na kailangan ginagawa ng intelligence community natin in this very globalized world, no? Na nagiging, sabi nyo nga kanina, Deputy, it's very complex. Deputy, an earlier school of thought was that hindi pwedeng magkaroon ng spies sa Pogo kasi galit ang China sa Pogo. Galit ang China sa casino bosses. And in fact, this was the rebuttal of our critics when we first surfaced the idea of espionage activities in Bamba na hindi na naman namin inimbento kasi nung nung nag-ocular inspection kami doon pagkatapos ng raid, mismong yung mga law enforcement and I suppose intel persons natin doon ay nagsabing meron din kaming iniimbestiga na possible hacking, possible interception ng government communications at government websites. So, pagkatapos ng unang rebuttal na ganun, lumalabas unti-unti ang ebidensya hanggang ngayon. First, dun sa defected agent na si alias Eric, who penetrated Cambodia's scam compounds. Tapos yung Washington Post report about criminal networks in Myanmar enjoying protection from the Chinese government. And now, itong Shi Zhejiang, allegedly, both billionaire boss at saka MSS agent na iniimbestigan nyo pa. So, sang-ayon ba kayo, Deputy, sa akin na itong walang spy sa Pogo kasi galit ang China sa Pogo theory, dapat abandonahin na ito?
Madam Chair, for us to fully understand to what ends the CCP and the Chinese government will go or to what lengths they will go, we first have to understand that their ideology is rooted in Marxist-Leninist doctrine. Ang ibig po sabihin nun, they don't have any comms about what we would call tactical alliances. And these tactical alliances may involve, for example, what we call whitelist parties. Ano po itong mga whitelist parties? Ito po yung mga partido, political parties that don't have very strong ideological leanings. So, pwede po silang makipag-alyansa sa mga ganong klaseng partido. But more importantly, Madam Chair, there has now been there's been established evidence that even po yung mga Chinese triad groups have been used by several levels of subterfuge, either to the MSS or through other means. Sila po ay ginagamit din. If the only way to gain a foothold, we have seen this in other countries and probably even in our own country, if one of the ways to establish foothold is to establish, for example, a gambling den or other means of illicit activity, then they will resort to that, Madam Chair. Again, because it is deeply rooted in their doctrine. Wala po silang pinipili na pamamaraan as long as it will ultimately serve the party's ends.
Ganong salita na ang ibig sabihin dito ay ang pagkakaisa.
Bunyog Party List.
Halika na, bunyog party list ka na. Halika na, bunyog party list ka na.
Sa susunod, ang atinang suportahan, Bunyog Party List, nagtataguyod ng katotohanan